Simon, is it streaming?
It's doing something.
Well, I've got it slightly connected.
It's yeah, I think it's going to work now. We've got people's initials appearing, so I think it must be working. Yep.
Yep, we'll go, are we?
Yep.
Splendid. Okay, Chair, if you want to start the meeting then. I'm advised we are live streaming.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Steve. Yeah, I can see we're live streaming. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Audit and Performance Committee, 19th of November. And welcome, everybody. Before I start, if I may, before we start the meeting proper, I'd just like to talk about one of our members that unfortunately passed away recently, which is Ian Doggett. And I think I speak for us all, if I may do, including Alice, the chairman of the authority, is with us, and I hope she agrees and agrees with my sentiments totally. Getting to know Ian for a short period of time as he joined the authority, I personally, I know others did, found him a very amiable person to talk to, if you like, an elder statesman of the authority and his local, if you like, from Torbay. But if you don't mind bearing with me for a second, because I decided that, did I know Ian Daggett properly, or did I just know him as a person? But I was surprised to know, heartened that, according to what I've read and people have said, he was a friend of all who championed those in need, which I think is a really strength of character. I didn't realise, and I know now, he was a ceremonial mayor of Torbay, and also he was chairman of Torbay from 2018 to 2019. And he was the councillor for Clifton and I think it was Maidfield for 17 years. So, well-liked person. I think I speak for us all when we'll miss him, his personality and his likeable nature. So if I may, through you, I'd like to offer 1 minute silence to remember him by, if everybody's happy with that. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Okay, before we start, if I may point out, as Steve Yates has said, we are live streaming. And of course, as we all know, while we're not speaking, is videos off and on silence, please, if you may. And also, if you're happy with this, as we look at each agenda item and staff and colleagues will be making their presentations, if you kindly wait till they finish to ask questions. And also, I think it would help both Steve and myself, if possible. I know Percy can't do this; he's phoned in, and Percy will just have to shout when he wants to come in. But if you'd like to acknowledge it on the chat line, it would go forward that way. So, if we're all happy with that, if I may start proper, Steve, apologies.
Chair, we've received no apologies. My understanding is Julian Brazil was going to join us, but obviously he hasn't yet. So if he doesn't, though, I...
Thank you. That's very kind of you, Steve. Thank you. So moving on to item 2, if I may, which is the minutes of the... Sorry, minutes. Yes.
Terry Napper, may I say that I have to do a high street audit at 3:30, so I'll be going just before 3:30 if we're still on air. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that, Terry. And if we are there at 3:30, I think you'll be on your own. Okay. So there we are. So forgive me. So minutes of the last meeting, pages 1 to 6. Do you see them as a true factual evidence-based item, and we'll have to agree with that?
Chairman, there is an error of spelling on the bottom of page 2. The word resolved is totally incorrectly spelt.
Thank you very much for that, Percy. ever the eagle eye. So could we correct that, please, Steve?
Yeah, that'll be corrected, Chair. But other than that, if members are happy to approve those minutes as a correct record.
That's very kind. I think members' silence, if I may. I think they can be approved. Okay, thank you. So if I may, I'll move on. So item 3, ladies and gentlemen, items requiring urgent attention.
Chair, there are no items that I'm aware of.
Okay, thanks for that, Steve. So moving on again, item 4, Devon and Somerset Farm Rescue Authority financial statements 2019-2020, and clearly what I'd like to do now is say hello to Barry and Aditi, if that's okay. I know you'll be taking us through it. So if I may hand over to Amy now, please, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the second time the committee will have seen the financial statements for 2019-20. So that was the year ended March 20. The reason is that when we last presented these to the committee, there were some outstanding audit adjustments, and in particular a pensions item which needed clarification. So the final report is presented now by the auditors alongside the final statement of accounts. And I'll hand over to Barry and Aditi to take you through the changes since it was last discussed.
Amy, Chair, thank you. So again, Amy, thank you for introducing this report. I'll just very briefly introduce it, and then I'll ask Aditi to take you through the detail of what's changed. So we're coming to the end of what seems to be the never-ending audit, which is in no way a reflection of Devon and Somerset Fire Authority. This is an updated report. Members, for ease of what's changed since the last version that we provided to you, those sentences highlighted in yellow are the bits that have changed. So in terms of the audit approach that's set out on page 5, that set out the number of issues that were still to be resolved. You will see that all of those items have now been resolved. The 2 items which are still shown as being outstanding are the receipt and review of the pension fund auditor assurances and the receipt of the management letter of representation. We are currently still waiting for the receipts of the pension fund assurances. We are aware that that is on its way imminently, and we expect it within the next 48 hours. The fact that we haven't received that is nothing that the authority needs to worry about. And as soon as we've received that, we will be able to issue our audit opinion. We don't expect there to be any issues within that that you need to be aware of, other than we're communicating to you now. The receipt of the management letter of representation, hopefully you will approve that again today, and then once we've got that. Aditi, may I ask you just to take us briefly through the other things that have changed within the report?
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of what's changed in the audit findings report, there's the first relates to on page 3, we've highlighted that there was already a material uncertainty in relation to the valuation of land and buildings, but the pension fund auditors informed us that there's also now a material uncertainty in relation to the valuation of the pension fund property assets. And because the authority's share of this is material, there's a corresponding material uncertainty in the authority's accounts, which has been amended for. The other adjustment which I wanted to talk about briefly was in relation to the valuation of land and buildings, which we've set out on page 8. There was one error which we identified, which was in relation to one asset where the floor areas provided to the valuer were incorrect, which led to an overstatement of that particular property. We've then undertaken an extrapolation of that, which is an unadjusted error, as an extrapolated figure is not something we would expect the authority to adjust. And the final point which I wanted to draw to your attention is on page 9 of our report, which relates to the adjusted IAS 19 pensions report, which is coming out of the consultation on the MacLeod Sargent judgment. The authority obtained a revised report which showed that the net pension liability was overstated by 2.2 million, and based on the firm's guidance and in line with the IAS 10. This is a non-adjusting post-balance sheet event, and the authorities made a disclosure to that effect. The other changes highlighted in yellow basically refer to that again. So I'm not going to go over them again, but happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you for that, Aditi. Anybody would like to ask Aditi questions at this stage at all?
I've got a question, Percy, here, Chairman. Is the speaker said something about correcting something to do with the floor area? I think I heard it right. How on earth was that discovered, if that's what I heard?
So as part of our audit testing, we compare the floor areas that have been used in the valuation compared to the floor plans, and that identified a discrepancy.
Well done to you.
Thank you.
Yes, it was. That was very astute of you, actually, Aditi. Well done. Does it give us any more money at all, or less money?
Say again, sorry.
Does that give us more money or less money?
Well, I think with evaluations, it's more of an estimate. So I think the estimate was slightly incorrect, basically.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, any more questions, please? I've got one coming from Amy Webb. To everybody, Amy. I think Amy's giving us the, sorry.
Apologies, Chair. I was just clarifying that gives us a slightly lower value asset on our balance sheet, which we'll need to correct for the next year, but not material to our revenue budget. But I believe Councillor Brazil had a question.
Yeah, if I may, I was just interested in the property portfolio in respect of the pensions, and I just wonder if you could be slightly more explanation as to the variance in that, up or down, or what the problems are.
Do you want me to take that, DT?
I just wanted to clarify whether the councillor was referring to the material uncertainty in relation to the pension fund assets. Is that what you?
Yeah.
Yeah, Barry, you can take that. Yeah.
You could have continued. Yeah. So basically, councillor, the issue is that as we know, pandemic was here at the end of March, and what that means is that the property assets held by the pension fund, whilst they were valued at a certain value, because there was a freeze in market transactions and uncertainty over what those valuations and what those assets may realise when they were actually disposed of may be different. In accordance with RICS guidance, the valuer has issued a material valuation uncertainty. So it just basically means that you need to attach greater caution to the value of those assets, because if they were to be realised, they may realise a different amount. So all we're doing is we're just providing an emphasis of matter, similar to the authority's own assets, but also in relation to the assets contained within the pension fund, which the council has a share of. Is that clear?
Yeah, thank you for that. No, that is clear. I was just wondering, I mean, first of all, I suppose is all right, how long is a piece of string? Because with the pandemic, we don't really know. But when do we expect to have clarification onto the valuation? And also, is that going to have a knock-on effect in respect of, presumably, if the property values are going down, then, and I'm presuming we're talking about commercial property here. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's a presumption too far. That if property values and commercial property values are going down, then obviously the rental value of them will presumably decrease as well. So not only is it an asset value, but it's also a revenue issue.
So, councillor, it affects all properties. So it's not just corporate properties. So again, it may impact upon the build cost as well. So again, we look at the indices to see what the construction costs are, and again, depreciated replacement assets valued at depreciated replacement cost, i.e. operational assets. are affected by those build costs. Now you're right about, well, when will we know? Because the pandemic was at its very start at the 31st of March, that's the point when the valuers made that uncertainty. Now, because there was just a lack of market evidence at that time. Now we would expect that the market has started to move again. There is greater evidence out there that valuers will be able to use in the future to say, okay, well, have property values gone up, down, or have they remained the same? So we would expect that in the future, also for the next year end at the 31st of March, there would be better evidence out there upon which valuers will be able to make their judgments. And indeed, the latest guidance from RICS indicates that that material uncertainty is no longer there, but it does still apply as at the 31st of March.
Amy.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just to put that in a bit of context for what that means for the authority's finances. So the bit of information that we're waiting on is the local government pension scheme valuation. Because that's a funded scheme, effectively the valuation that happens each year is based on the amount of income in the scheme and the asset against its liabilities and outgoings. So the authority eventually has to make up the difference. And the way that happens is via the employer contributions that are made. So whilst there's an issue for the year-end balance sheet because the pension scheme is a big figure, the way it plays out through to the revenue account is actually in the employer's pension contributions. So there might be a risk that if the assets are valued lower this year, then we would have to pay higher levels of contributions in future years. I hope that helps.
Are you happy with that, Julian?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I think it's particularly what Amy's just said there, that it is a, it is a worry that if, for example, we have a lot of our pension our pension fund is invested in commercial property, and there's a crash in commercial property values and rental, then that is going to have a massive impact on our revenue budget. On the employer's contribution. Which will come out of our revenue budget, presumably. So, it's just, I mean, there's obviously no one really knows at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify that pension fund and its assets are managed by Devon County Council, and that's the scheme that we're involved in through the local government pension scheme. So they obviously have an independent board who look at the assets in their portfolio.
Okay, thank you for that. I can't see anybody else in the chat room. Percy, did you want to say anything, or was that, don't take this the wrong way, was that heavy breathing? Sorry.
No, I'm fine on that, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Percy. Mike. Unfortunately, we can't hear you, Mike.
There we are. I've got two ways to unmute. On the system, so apologies for that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
You hear me? Yeah. So I just wanted to also make the point that our exposure to that risk in terms of LGPS contributions is much smaller than principal councils, because of course the number of employees we have in the local government pension scheme is a small proportion of our workforce. Those pension issues do not impact on the firefighters pension scheme. So with around 300 employees who are entitled to be members of the local government pension scheme, our exposure to risk there is much smaller than councils like Devon County Council, and I just wanted to put that into perspective.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Mike. Anybody else want to ask DT, Barry, or any questions? If not, you're happy. I'd like to thank them both for their explanations, as usual. Good to see you both, of course. And if I may move on to item 4B, if that's okay, which is the statements of accounts from 2019 to 20, pages 39 to 100. Amy, I think that's you again, isn't it?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is asking the committee to approve the final version of the statement of accounts for 1920 for publication on our website, please.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Any questions for Amy at all? I gather by...
Chair, if there aren't any questions, can I suggest that members of the committee only turn their videos on and we take a vote on this by a simple show of hands?
Okay, that's a good idea, Steve. Thank you for that. So what Steve just said, members, if you can do, please. Good.
So all those in favour of approving? That looks unanimous. Does that include yourself as well, Percy?
So approved.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. So well done, Percy. You're doing really well. Thank you for that. Thank you. So moving on to item 4C, which is the 2019-20 letter of representation, pages 101 to 104. Again, Amy, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is asking the committee to approve that the chair of the committee and myself sign the letter of representation to be sent back to the auditors regarding the preparation of the statement of accounts and the final audit process. Thank you.
You're muted, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So if members would like to show their faces and wave their hands if they're happy for us to go ahead. Okay.
That looks unanimous. So am I taking it that you're approving as well, Percy?
So approved. I haven't changed
Thank
my
you.
mind yet. Keep moving.
Thank you very much. And I'll be signing electronically, if that's okay with everybody as well. So at that then, if I may, moving on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the Audit and Review 2020-2021 Progress Report, pages 105 to 110. And I see Julia's up and running and waiting to raring to go. Julia, over to you for me.
Chair, before Julie starts, could I just take the opportunity to introduce Julie? She's joined us as Head of Organisational Assurance, and as part of her department, she's responsible for internal audit and the assurance arrangements. So I've asked Julie if she could just do a quick run through. This is a report that we bring to the committee regularly to talk about progress with our internal audit plan. So thank you, Chair, just wanted to do that to introduce Julie. Thank you.
No, and thank you for that, Mike, because there we will assume. So I hope you're enjoying yourself, Julie. I hope your new career with the Farm Rescue Service you're enjoying. So over to you, madam. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mike. So the key message of the Internal Audit and Review report is that the impact of the response to and recovery from COVID has impacted delivery of the internal audit plan this year because the internal audit resource has been diverted to the assurance cell. However, the first audit has now been completed, or it's in the process of being completed by Devon Audit Partnership, and that's an audit of the Training Academy with the draft report expected this month. And that's been the first opportunity to test remote audit working, which has been successful. So as we're now in, although we're in lockdown 2, we are starting to look back at business as usual. So currently revising the audit plan and priorities to deliver before the end of March and just aligning the original plan with the resource we have left to look at what we can cover before the end of March. So that process is currently underway. And the other piece of work that's been undertaken by the team is just looking at the updating the audit actions, focusing on the higher priority items. And you can see in the tables at the back end of the report that the total number of overdue items is reducing, although there is a relatively higher number of revised dates within this last quarter because of the impact of COVID on business as usual. So that's essentially the key messages from the report, fairly brief this month for this committee meeting. Just going to cross over to my audit colleague, John Bly, just to see if there's anything he wishes to add at this point, and then we're happy to take any questions.
No, that's everything. That's all the key points in the report.
Lovely. Thank you, John.
And thank you. Can I thank you very much for that succinct report as well, because it saves time, and I know I think it's really good. And well done to you. Okay.
Thank you.
So, any questions? I've got Pam. Pam, you got a question?
Well, thank you. I just wondered if you could, as I'm a newer member to the committee, so I haven't looked at the audit work before, could you give me a sort of more qualitative explanation? So on item 4.5, sorry, not item, agenda points 4.5. It says about longer term project work that's overdue, particularly for Safer Together programme. So we're going to be doing some work on the later agenda item around performance indicators. So I would just like a clear idea in my head about what those sorts of actions are for the audit and what that means for the programme.
Right. I'll hand that one to John. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Pam, some of the previous audits that took place that this relates to in particular would have been the fleet audit. So, an audit of our fleet and equipment department, and a lot of the actions that fell out of that and dates originally agreed actually crossed over with the Safer Together programme and all the work that's going on there around our fleet replacement strategy. So where original actions, the dates may show as being overdue, it's because they've been superseded by what's happening in the project, and it's going to happen anyway. It's all programmed in. So it's not essentially that the project itself or the programme is overrunning. It's that from when the actions were originally discussed as a result of the audit, that then they've fallen overdue since then, if that makes sense. I'm not sure I articulated that very well, so I hope it.
No, that's fine. I wasn't thinking that the project was behind, just wasn't quite sure what kinds of things you were auditing, which you did in fact answer in your answer. So that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Yeah, it's bound to happen. I mean, we are living in such uncertain times, this, that, and the other. So things are bound to get behind, not intentionally, of course, but this is the world, unfortunately, we live in at this moment in time. So thank you, both of you. So are there any more questions? If not, I'd like to move on to item 5A now, which is the
Chair, just before you do that, please, that report was only for noting. I don't think we need to see a formal show of hands, but if we could just leave it for a couple of seconds and we'll take silence as assent.
Thank you for that, Steve. Yeah.
There's no one coming up on the chat or anything, so I'm taking it that everyone's happy that that's noted. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you for that, Steve. Yeah, I noted it was for noting only, so and thank you for sort of correcting me. So moving on to item 5A then, the review committee. Who's talking us through this one, please? Hello? Item 5A, can everybody hear me?
Chair, I suspect that will be Gavin Ellis if we're talking about the service performance from April to September. I suspect Gavin will be kicking it off, but then may hand over to other colleagues.
And thanks for that, Steve. Over to you, Gavin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, apologies there. I was trying to take myself off of mute, my video on. Thank you very much. You will have seen the performance report, and I was going to take you through the exceptions and the headings within the executive summary. So first of all, looking at the positive performance outcomes. So we've seen a reduction of 3% of fires where people live in comparison to last year. And following on from that, where we've seen a reduction of fire-related injuries where people work, visit, and in vehicles by just around 50% since last year. Following on with the good news, there's been a 17% reduction in fires where people work, visit, and within vehicles. Now, we don't know whether some of this is going to be related to COVID with businesses shut down, but further trend analysis will be able to identify that. We've also seen an increase in our emergency response standards for road traffic collisions sitting at 77.8%. So that's a good news story. However, there are a number of areas that we need to give further rise to. And we've seen the executive summary, there are some areas around performance indicators where we need to improve. And that is related to fire-related deaths where people live. This is linked also, though, and you'll see within that there's a couple of deaths that we've had within the first quarter where it's currently still sat with the coroners. We can't report on those fully yet. We've seen an increase of just under 6% of where people are injured within where they live from fire. So that's gone up from 34 to 36. Although 6% sounds a larger percentage, the actual number increases by 2, which is still more than we'd want anyway. And we've seen the ERS, which is an area of work that we're really focused on now for service delivery. for meeting our fires in domestic premises is sitting at around 72%. So that's 3% reduction on what it was last year. You'll see on page 8, I just want to bring to attention a slight amendment typo. So on page 8, in chart number 1, number of fire-related deaths where people live, in the final column for September 2020, that should read 7 and not 8, and that was recategorised after this report had been produced. So that sits at 7 at the organisational average. Moving on to the page 9 of the exception report. This is for the fire-related deaths where people live. We can see that 79% of the dwelling fires had smoke alarms present. An additional 3% of those had an alarm that was defective. So there's some work to do there around the work that we do with staff and targeting of those households. However, what I would say that when you look at paragraph 2 on that page, where it talks about the 2018 annual household survey, in the last sentence, it shows that the greatest level of smoke alarm ownership was within households classed as lone person over pensionable age, which is 88% of households, which is good because that demonstrates that we're targeting the right groups of people to be able to provide those smoke detectors to. You'll see within the summary reports, fire-related deaths where people live and the exception report for that. There's some areas of work that we're focused on at the moment around the fire-related deaths. We're going back to complete full audits of those to look at the case reviews to make sure that all of our departments in the organisation, from the fire investigation through prevention and protection, and all of our activities are focused in the right areas. So we're looking at what the outcomes are that are causing those factors to make sure that we can change the way that we deliver our services to be able to reduce these numbers further. Did you want me, Chair, did you want me to take you further through the performance measures, or would you prefer me now to wait for questions?
If that's okay with you, Gavin, and members, etc. If you carry on, it'd be really good. Thank you.
Okay, certainly. I noticed from Pam, if it's okay, Chair, that she's got some questions about the format, meaning the data. And from Andrew, there's a question. Would it be possible for the formatting, would it be possible to bring in either Ben or Alice who have put the report together to answer those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. I see Andrew's got a question as well. So is that related to Andrew Saywell's question on chat or not? Anyway.
Chair, I'm quite happy for Gavin to finish his report before I ask my question.
Okay, thanks for that, Andrew. Sorry.
So I was just looking through the final parts of my notes. I was just focusing on the areas of the exception reports which we've gone through. I see that Ben's come on now. So that's the end of the presentation of the paper. I'm happy to take questions over to Ben around the formatting, Chair.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, I see Pam's got a lot of questions she wants to ask you, followed by Andrew. So over to you to answer Pam's very observant questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, was that me? You're inviting me to ask some questions?
Yes, I am, Pam, because if we're not careful, I'm not being a hypocrite, but I think if we're not careful, I have to balance the whole proceedings up. And what I don't want to do, even though I'd like officers to do what they're doing, I think if I'm not careful, I'll be unfair to members. If you've got a lot of questions and you ask them round this particular subject, I think it'd be nice if we allowed you to do it. If that's not too bad. So you know where I'm coming from, Pam, don't you?
I do. Thank you.
Crack on while the going's good. Thank you.
I have so many questions. I wonder if it's worth Councillor Saywell just getting his out of the way, or if anyone else, because I've got loads and I don't want to hog the whole discussion.
No, thank you for that. We live in a very equalities world now. So Andrew, you're first on stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Chair. Mine's about the exception reports. I am a bit concerned by what I've read in there. In particular, what to me looks like at face value with some of them to be very long response times before the fire engines were able to arrive, particularly if I look at Ilfracombe and Bideford and Brixham. Now, I know in Bideford and Brixham, these were incidents at 5:49 and 3:50 in the morning, but and I don't want to be critical of the crews that attended those incidents because they must have been very difficult and distressing. But are those audits you're looking at also looking at how we can actually improve our response times? Is there a reason why, were these in much deeper rural locations? I know where I live, if God forbid we did have a fire, it probably would take at least 15 minutes and probably longer for an engine to get out to me. But I would be concerned though if that's the amount of time that it's taken for an engine to get to an incident if it's within a town where there is a station.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Thank you for your question. One of the things we are looking at is, and I'm sure Ben will be able to come in a moment and talk this, give a bit more detail, but at the moment our calls are categorised within the same areas about how we look at emergency response standards. What we have found is that every time there's been a failure, the local group will do a deep dive review into that to find out why it's occurred. And it's into either three categories. It's either call handling, being able to mobilise to the station, or the travel time from the station to the incident. What we have seen is a number of calls where the call handling time has taken longer because of the details that the control operatives are taking, has meant that the travel distance has then been delayed. What I will say for that though is that some of the categorisation has meant that incidents that don't sit inside the emergency response standards, so an automatic fire alarm, for example, doesn't sit within the ERS but has been categorised within that. So we're doing some work with Ben and his team to look at how we can extrapolate that information out to be able to put that into a different category so it completely cleanses the data. We're currently in the process of renewing our risk modelling data and tool work so that we'll be able to do that a lot cleaner. Ben, is there anything you'd like to add onto that?
No, thanks, Gavin. I think you covered that perfectly.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, so you're happy now then, Andrew. So if I may, I'll move on. And Pam, over to you with your stringent questions for Gavin and Ben.
I have many, and they're very varied in what they are. Because this is the first time I've looked at one of these performance reports, so some of the things like what the measures are, I don't really understand and just need some explanation. And then some of it's more about the actual content. I think the easiest is if I just start with page 6 and work through my notes. Is that okay?
Certainly, Councillor. Can I just add in one other point, if I may, before we begin? We've actually got Ben's new into post, as am I, and we've got a new area manager, Darren Peters, who's recently joined the team as well. One of the things that's key, one of my key objectives for the team, is to look at a complete refresh of our performance measures and the way we report against that. And Ben's come with a huge amount of background knowledge. So we've got a team meeting this Friday to decide and to discuss our performance measures and how we report them and how we present them. So I'm hoping that although this is the first time you've seen this report, it may be the last time you see this in its current format. Ben, is that fair to say?
I'm glad you said that. Yes, that's correct.
Could I just interject for a second, Pam? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude, but what Gavin and Ben, this new team, I'm not trying to stop you, far from it, but would you, Gavin, Ben, and your team, Pam's question, I understand where Pam's coming from totally, because it can be mind-blowing, this sort of technical data. So please, Pam, answer questions, but could I ask you, Gavin, Ben, when you've got the time to contact Pam on a one-to-one basis and bring her up to speed? Does that help, Pam?
I think it's probably fine, but it sounds like it's a very good time for me to do a thorough dissection of the report if you're reviewing it anyway.
No, I'm not trying to stop you. I'm just saying if you require that, to move on. But no, please, fire away.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thanks, Chair. So on page 6, like the main page 6, page 4 of the report, if you see what I mean, the big page 6, at the bottom, it's just a question about false alarms, because I don't actually know what the consequences are, because we've got this high number of automatic fire alarms going off, and the occasional malicious false alarm. And I just wondered, what are the consequences for that, particularly the automatic alarms, which presumably are commercial buildings? Do we do anything? Do we build them?
So what we have got, and this is so we've changed our response to automatic fire alarms in recent years, and we've seen the reduction in the false alarms that we go to. What we do have is a automatic fire alarm policy. So we'll respond to certain premises types at night or out of hours compared to during the day. So if we take sleeping accommodation, for example, like a care home or a hospital, during the day, between 9 and 5, we probably won't respond. And when the call comes through, there'll be a discussion with the responsible person at those locations who will identify what the cause is. Quite often, we were going to around about 98% of false alarms previously. What we will be attending, though, is those out of hours or high risk premises where there is life risk still, so hospitals, care homes, and we'll be making attendance at key times and having that dialogue with those properties. If, for example, we find there's a premises, I don't know, say a block of offices where we have a repeat call from the same location because of faulty equipment, we have a 3-strike system where after the first call, we'll write to them. If there's a second call, we'll write to them again. If there's a third call, we will then make an attendance to do a fire safety audit to see whether the responsible owner is compliant with the fire safety legislation or not. And if they're not, we'll continue that course of action to give advice and guidance. And if they don't take that up at that time, we'll still continue to get those repeat calls. We'll look at the enforcement activity.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Then on page 7, I've got a bunch of notes, and half of it's illegible, which is one of my banes of my life, is that my writing is bad. In the second paragraph, we've got changes to fire-related injuries where people work and visit in vehicles, which I'm assuming the reduction is down to COVID, because people have not been at work or in vehicles as much as in previous. Probably that can be a yes or no question you can come to, but if maybe I should do the page in one go. And then I wondered about where we've seen reductions and things, are we able to measure how they relate to the prevention and protection work? So obviously through the Safe Together programme, and I know we haven't come to the performance indicators yet, so I don't know where we're at on this. But do we measure when we attend incidents, are we keeping within that data? Have we done previous? I mean, actually, I say that further in the report. Of course, it does say that there is a history of that. So how do we look at that, and can we sort of marry up the data on that? And then I put a question around KPIs, but that's I mean we're coming to that later. And then again on the fire-related injuries where people live being an increase. I'm asking, is that also because of COVID? Because people have been at home more, so just by the sheer numbers of time spent at home. And then, but I did a little totting up of the numbers that you've given on the previous year and this year for fire-related injuries, and though one's gone up and one's gone down, it does look like overall it's gone down quite a lot. Have I totted that up correctly? I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I'll hand over to Ben in a moment if I can to talk about the measures, but the point you've made there about how do we ensure that our activities around prevention and protection have a reduction on our outcomes and injuries and fire-related deaths. Within the state of fire, within the HMI, it's recognised nationally that the fire and rescue sector have a real issue with being able to try and evaluate the work that they undertake to make sure that it has actually had an outcome. And the reason for that is because at the moment we're only measuring lagging indicators, so we're only reporting on things that have occurred that we can report back on. We can look at trends and look at amount of hours and activity taken to deliver prevention and protection activities, and look at the overall reduction in numbers, which will probably take a good 5 or so years worth of data to be able to recognise the activities that we've put in place has driven down a general downward trend. And now there'll be other societal factors that will impact that, but it's very difficult to evaluate it. I am going to bring Ben in at this point because Ben is our evaluation officer. So Ben will be able to give you some more detailed information around this.
Thanks, Gavin. Good afternoon, members. Yeah, as Gavin says, evaluation is an area where we are presently not where we need to be. And I think we are looking at almost a service redesign, really, of how we approach the prevention and protection work that we do, and embedding evaluation from the start. So, and that will tie into the measures that we are going to go on to talk to. I think, in short, evaluation will become a much bigger element of our work than it currently is and has been.
Thank you. So the only other bit of those questions was just about the changes in fire-related injuries, and is that all essentially down to COVID? Though overall there seems to have been a reduction. So do we have thoughts on that yet?
I'm going to ask Alice, if you're listening, Alice, can you answer that question? I've not seen it in the data, but it may be that we are just working on a hunch that that's what it's related to.
Yeah, I think the increases are slight. I think because the numbers are very small, if we look at like a percentage increase and things like that, it looks a lot more dramatic than it is. So I think we're dealing with quite low numbers. And if we looked at it, for example, on sort of a control chart and looked at kind of whether the data we were seeing was sort of, if we fit within normal ranges, then it would be within the kind of normal levels that we would expect. It may be slightly down to COVID, although, I mean, we've seen over the past sort of, over the duration of COVID, really a slight reduction in the number of dwelling fires overall during that period. So it's one that's a little bit difficult to kind of give a definitive answer on at the moment, really. I think it's something we're going to have to look into more and sort of learn from over as we review the sort of COVID data and we kind of look into it a little bit more. We might get a bit more of a picture, but I think it's sort of not at a stage where I can give you a yes or no. It's definitely down to COVID on that one, Pam. Councillor Buckingham, sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Alice. That's really helpful. Chair, I've still got more questions. Do you want to see if anyone else wants to ask any before I continue, or shall I just plow on?
No, I like your curiosity, actually. Just before, if I may, a couple of things that Gavin and Ben and Alice have said. One of the biggest problems that's been nationally for a number of years now, and I'm going to talk about our Kills campaign, if I may, which is the font of all knowledge, and for the general public. And I've been quite heavily involved with that for a number of years. The problem is it's that rich data that everybody's missing. How many people have you got to? And I think it's become relevant after, unfortunately after that, unfortunately Grenfell Towers, where it changed the whole format of the way people look. Its repercussions have been huge. So I get where Gavin, Ben, and the fire service are coming in general, because it's almost like a restart, isn't it? Where we're going from, work is going on in the background to try and get this rich data and part. That's like part of the home fire safety checks. People know where they are. Gavin mentioned before about smoke alarms, etc., etc. This, that, and the other. So, and what I do sympathise with any emergency service and beyond, is where you have to use percentages, because as we know, the actual. I am often mindful safety still. I do beg your pardon, because the success of driving fire-related deaths down is over 50% now. If I've got that right, Gavin. That's a huge success over the years. And the unfortunate part about it, when one single, unfortunate incident happens, it reflects totally on those percentages. So therefore, they look huge. And I'll leave it at this and let you carry on. One tragedy is one tragedy too much. Right, I'm off my soap still, Gavin. You would like to know. Over to you again, Pam. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to page 11, a couple of probably more basic questions. I wondered, so at the bottom it's got the household survey identifies that 91% of households have a working smoke alarm. I just wondered if we know what that is for our patch, because our other data is related to our patch. So it was just hard to mentally draw comparisons. And also on the first chart, it might be an artifact of the binning of the data, but it looked to me like the 5 to 30 minutes was a very significant difference in terms of being fatal or not fatal. And I know we have our under 10-minute arrival target. I just wondered, do we need another measure or something around the 30 minutes or the 5 to 30 minutes for, particularly if it's a longer, I don't know, not obviously one doesn't want to relax the target of 10 minutes by any means, but whether there's it'd be useful to just take an extra sort of slice in the data of looking at it, because that just looks like quite a big change at that point. And then the other question on this page was about this issue around lone adults, often pensionable age, who have smoke alarms, and their smoke alarms appear to be going off, but nobody turns up. I don't mean we don't turn up. I mean nobody's in the house. Nobody, so it takes time presumably to be reported, and therefore, however quick we come, the report is probably later than it would have been if they were in a shared occupancy house, or there might be someone there to help them to escape, or whatever it might be. And this looks like a really relatively a big problem in terms of the demographics of who gets affected. And I just wondered, and I don't know whether this is the right forum or whether a different one of our meetings is the best place to discuss it, whether we could do something looking around like a good neighbour scheme where we have identified people and we know, because we've visited them and we've fitted smoke alarms or whatever, but is there a scheme whereby we can encourage neighbours to check in, to listen if the alarm's going, to knock on the door, whatever it might be. Obviously that's dependent on, and it's a sort of communications exercise more than anything else, and dependent on neighbourly goodwill. But if ever neighbourly goodwill was a thing we could tap into, it's been joined this year. So that was my questions on that page. I'll stop there again.
Thank you, Councillor. If I could answer the last question, the point you just made there, I'll hand over to Ben and Alice for the first 2 points about where we get our data from. So you're right. We before this financial year, so last financial year, we spent £60,000 on new misting systems for those that are our most vulnerable members of society. And essentially what that has is a 100-litre fogging system that comes with 2 fixed installation smoke detectors. So it's one of them will go over where the individual tends to sit, and that's either going to be in the front room or in the bedroom. And then the other detector will go into another part of the house where we know the individual's going to be. What that does is it's Wi-Fi enabled, and it's also got an auto dialer SIM card within it, and you can nominate friends and family or an emergency service. So if one detector goes off, it will alert a friend or neighbour to let them know that one of the detectors has gone off. If the second detector goes off, which would indicate the spread of fire or the smoke within a wider part of the house, the misting system will then activate, and it's been demonstrated to be really successful. So that's some of the areas we're looking at. One of the things that we're keen to do is start to really look at what our outcomes are that we need to achieve around changing people's behaviours, because although we are putting up lots of smoke detectors and there's lots of people that have smoke detectors, we are still getting those fire deaths and those fire-related injuries. So we need to look about how we can change those behaviours. And I think the point you've made there about that sort of scheme around friends and family is a good point, and I'll certainly take it away to look at. Thank you.
I think to add to what Gavin has just said there, in terms of our targeting of vulnerable individuals, we are working with our communications and engagement team to better target the people that we need to. We do have access to demographic information. It's not as granular as you might like, but it will give us some idea as to where we might find people that we need to engage further with.
Sorry, if I may interject, if you don't mind, Pam, please don't take this personally or the wrong way. I think the way the conversation is going, yeah, these questions are really good you've got going, and I hope that because we do need to move on, if that's okay. But it's not for me to make this decision, Gavin. It's for you and Pam. But Pam is asking some really good questions. I can see you right into it, Pam, etc. So maybe you can, agree, as I said before, with Gavin, Ben, and Alice, and they can give you one-to-one. Whatever questions you've got to ask, they can answer them on a one-to-one basis. I'm not trying to put you off at all. I'm just conscious that there are people that have got other meetings to go to. So are you prepared to sort of, is that acceptable to you at the moment?
Well, I mean, I can do that, but perhaps we need more time scheduling if we're going to go through the performance reports, because I do feel like this is quite a key part. I don't feel like most of the questions I'm asking are not questions that the public wouldn't want to know if they were looking at it.
That's a very fair question. Very fair question. Sorry. Okay, let's go down a different road then, madam. Okay. How many questions have you actually got, if you don't mind me asking?
I haven't numbered them. There's about 3 or 4, I would say.
Okay, then. If all colleagues are happy for that, please carry on. But I still think it would be beneficial for all, because I can see where your mindset's coming from, and I think it would be nice that the colleague brought you up to speed. Because you've obviously clearly got a hungry appetite, which is very healthy. Thank you.
So there was just hang on, I was wondering what's the best thing to focus on then. There was just, I think, was someone, Alice, were you going to give an answer around the timing, the 10 minutes and the 30 minutes?
So it's a really interesting point, and it's something I think that we'll be looking at as we start going through the IRM, the refresh of the IRMP, because it's going to be a key area for us to look at around our emergency response standards and how we also integrate some of these other factors, like a delay in kind of the discovery of the fire, and then maybe a delay in then notification to the service that there's been an incident. So we have the duration from ignition to discovery, and then a duration from discovery to actually making that call to the fire service. And whilst we obviously at the moment have our standards of, when we receive the call, getting to the dwelling fire within 10 minutes, that's our objective, our aim. There's all these other sort of timings that kind of lead into us even receiving the call. So I think it's important for us to understand the impact of that more as well, and that will link then into some of the community safety work and some of the other questions that you've raised and that Gavin's answered around how we then put mitigation into place where we've got high risk individuals and things to try and improve those sort of initial durations, and hopefully then in turn improve the outcome of the incidents. So it is something that's we're certainly considering as part of that process. I think your other question was around the annual household survey. I don't have that data for our service area. I've only got it at national level at the moment. So I think it says in the report 79% of the dwelling fire incidents that we attended had a alarm present. So that obviously that's a lot lower than the 91% of households surveyed. But if we're ending up there as a result of a fire, I guess then there's a potential, the likelihood of them not having working smoke detection is probably slightly higher because something could escalate because they're not getting alerted. So that's another area, I think, when we start looking through some of the community risk reduction work and the IRMP and things, they're going to be sort of lines of inquiry that we're going to go down and sort of investigate further, I think.
Thank you. For the benefit of Chair and everybody else, I will condense to one final question. So there's a few that sort of fit together about how we compare our data with national data when we're looking at our performance. So on page 15, where we compared with national for, number of hospitalisations per population in the bottom, compared with an England rate. For me, obviously age, and I'm sure all the data shows that age is an important factor demographically, and I'm sure that, there's others as well, like the living alone and so on. When it's presented like this and it's just the headline numbers, it's really difficult to really see how we compare, because how we compare is a function of our demographic as well. So I'm not expecting you to give me an answer or give me a picture of stuff, but I suppose my question is really about how we work our comparisons, and I think this is probably relevant for the inspections as well, to measure where we really need to make improvements in the context of our demographics. Do we go to that final level, or are we able to?
We are able to, and it's something that we look at in quite a lot of detail. And again, to keep linking back to the IRMP and all the other kind of risk reduction work that's going to be coming up. And so we look in a lot of detail at demographics. We've got something called Experian Mosaic data that we look at. So we do a lot of profiling against that. That's harder to do a comparison against other areas because we only have data that's relevant to us in that. But we also use like the data from the Office for National Statistics. So we've got the demographic data from there and things. So that does enable us to then do different comparisons, and also to compare against, other, like I say, other fire and rescue services and things. So we do have that information available, but it's just a case of us breaking it down into, there's so many ways of looking at it. So I think it's quite a substantial piece of work to do that properly, but it's something we look at and we do consider.
Thank you. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Chair.
No, thank you for that, Pam. But I do urge you and Gavin, etc., to have a get together, because I think Pam's got a lot to offer as well, and I think Gavin and Ben and Alice could answer a lot of your questions you want to. So thank you for that. Percy, did you want to say anything at the moment? Because clearly you're on the phone. Percy?
Yes, I have one question, Chairman. So on pages 13 and 14, it gives a resume of fatal fires, and as Andrew Saywell pointed out about response times. But if you go to page 18, there are two more, and there's an omission in each. It doesn't have a response time, and both were fatals. So can that be covered in due course? Or is there a reason why there's no response times in those two other examples on 18? Thank you.
Sorry, shall I answer that one, Chairman? So that's purely an omission. It's just a case that information should have been in there. We'll make sure that it goes in future reports.
Thank you.
Over to you then, Gavin.
Thank you very much. Just following on from that, I'll be more than happy to arrange an individual briefing with Councillor Buchan, and I know that we are also looking at developing wider corporate measures, which I would be keen to get that information from Councillor Buchan. Certainly keen and interested, which I'm very pleased about. Was there any further questions? If not, I'll draw this individual item to a close. That's okay, Chair.
No, that's fine, Gavin, and thank you for all your information. I think it's been very enlightening for us all. So it appears not. So Terry, sorry, beg your pardon. Terry, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Yes, I did, Chairman. We have talking about response times. We have a problem in Glastonbury with the appliance going across a pedestrian crossing. I've received no further information about that. Because if we don't use the raised area of a pedestrian area, it's another 3 minutes to answer a call, and there's a lot of consternation in Glastonbury about this, because the police and the ambulance will use that. It's an old road which they pedestrianised, but the fire service will not use it, like I say, and it's added another 3 minutes to if there's an area in Glastonbury which they need to respond to. And I just wonder whether I could have at some stage, whether you could send me an email and update me on that, please. Thank you.
Certainly, Councillor Napper, I can do that. I can look into that. One of the things that we've really changed there, that we're focused on ERS at the moment, and we're looking at marginal gains across all the elements that make up the performance measures for emergency response standards. So if there's an area that we can improve our ERS that's done safely and to get us to the incident sooner, then we will certainly look into that, and I will respond to you in due course once I've had a response from the local group commander.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think, Gavin, over to you again then.
Thank you, Chair. I think that was it for this item. I don't think there's anything further that Ben wanted to add, but I think from my perspective, that was everything. Thank you.
No, and thank you for that. Really good session. That was, very almost like a scrutiny panel, wasn't it? It's good, isn't it? So, if I may, then that the report was to be noted. So I'll leave it a couple of seconds, as Steve Jenks has pointed out, that we're all happy it's been noted. So that seems to be agreed, I think. So if I may, is move on to item 6, which is the review of corporate performance measures from pages 111 to 114. Report to the Director of Finance and Resourcing.
Thank you, Chair. So hopefully the report is fairly self-explanatory, but this is bringing together the working party of members established for two purposes, the first of which is to monitor appliance availability and outcomes as a result of changes made under the Safer Together programme in January, and secondly, to instigate the reporting against the environmental strategy and to get some quantitative measures put in place. So it's to note the agreed membership, which would be Councillors Buchan, Clayton and Saywell, and also that we would be intending to get a meeting set up in due course.
Okay, that's good. Questions? Pam, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. This is all fine, and obviously I'm very happy. I just wondered, because it had gone down from 5 to 3, and I understand the rationale, but I wondered if it would be worthwhile just expanding it back to 5 and including perhaps a member representative of some of the other committees, just with a view for those indicators tying in with what the other committee work is and sort of, holding things together a bit.
Thank you for that. Amy or Mike, is that be?
Thanks. I'll pass over to Mike, who I believe was involved in that discussion. I guess it depends whether we're considering wider corporate measures, which I know that Ben and Gavin are working on in terms of looking at the suite of what we report. I think this is quite narrow in terms of the performance reporting, which goes to this committee, and obviously instigating those environmental ones. But I know that Mike's had some conversations around this, so if I may pass that over to him.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Amy.
Yeah, so sorry, could I ask Pam to just repeat what the first part of the question was, because I missed that?
Yeah, sure, Mike. Originally it was 5 members, and then it went down to 3 because of the change of the membership of this committee. So I'm just wondering if there's a value to inviting, particularly the corporate and community. Sorry, I always forget the right order of the initials. The corporate and community committee, because they obviously brought in the Safer Together programme and have a look at the IRMP, and so whether it would be just useful to have them in the discussion.
Well, in terms of membership of the working party, there's absolutely no reason why we can't review that and include some additional members. So there's no there's no sort of standing orders issues or anything that would stop that happening if it was felt that those additional members would add value to the process. So if there are any particular members who want to get involved who aren't included in the current 3, there is no reason why we can't do that. So we don't need to get any other authority approval. I think the original agreement was it would be members of the Audit and Performance Review Committee that looked at this and worked with officers on developing those measures. But as I said, I don't think that prevents us from adding some additional members if other members felt that added value. So if there's any suggestions that want to be put forward, we can have a look at that, and I'm sure we can make that work.
Thanks, Mike. I haven't particular suggestions. It was quite general, but perhaps since there's no sort of strict standing orders, we'll just take it to email.
Yes, I'm not sure what you're suggesting, that we opening it up to members of the authority to, if there's any other people who have an interest in getting involved. I think there is a need to keep the working group at an effective number, just in terms of being able to get dates agreed and things like that. So if we've currently got 3, then perhaps another couple would still be manageable, but perhaps we want to try and keep it to around 5.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting more, just going back to the original, but if me and Andrew and Peter and you and have an email, we can just make a decision there rather than taking up more time now. It's fine, because it doesn't have to be sort of decided on here, that's fine.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do that. What I would need to do in accordance with standing orders is just agree that with the chair of the committee. So I'd need, once we'd got some names, I'd need to speak to Mark and make sure that Mark, as the chair of the committee, was happy with that, and then I can make that happen.
Happy with that response, Pam? Yeah. Okay, Percy, do you want to say something?
No, thanks. Finished. Chairman.
Okay, thanks, President. At this moment in time, Terry, did you want to mention something about the email that came out earlier today? Is that appropriate for you?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chairman. It's for Steve, in actual fact. Steve, thank you very much for the comprehensive email you sent about the appliances. It's very informative, and I think that for me anyway, we can see what we're spending on our equipment. Just one thing, I would like to know, if it's not going to take too much time later on, what the stations have got in the review of those appliances, and the numbers of the appliances which we have in service. Thank you very much for that, Steve.
Chair, couple of issues there. Thank you for bringing Councillor Napper in on that, and it's always grateful to get some thanks. But I have to say, I didn't prepare that list. I merely acted as a mailman in sending it out. The other thing I would say is that it doesn't really form part of today's agenda. Comfortable to allow the discussion to run. What I would suggest is that the people that did compile the list, and I think Amy was involved in that, I know she's just got a camera on, does compile the relevant information in due course, and as we did with the initial list, we'll circulate it to members via email.
Amy, do you want to say something?
Thanks. Yes, it was my team that compiled that list and the information involved. If it's okay with you, Councillor Napper, I'll just send you an email directly so that we can discuss your requirements.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
And thanks for reminding us, Steve. I just thought that I think it was a compliment paid, so I thought it was appropriate that now we know it's Amy and the team, and thanks to Steve too for sending it out, that it's always nice for officers, uniformed staff, etc. to now and again get praise where praise is due. So I think it was well worthwhile, so thank you for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there's no more questions, again, this report was to be noted, so I'll just give it a couple of seconds, just in case. Well, clearly that must be the case, and you'll be delighted to hear, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last stuff on the agenda. I'd like to thank you all for attending. I'd like to thank you all for your questions. I think it's been meaningful and succinct. So, Sarah, did you wish to say something?
Just wanted to congratulate you, Chairman, on your meeting. Very good indeed. I don't know if you caught any of that. I think I had the wrong piece in the machine. I just wanted to congratulate you on your meeting.
No, and thank you. Thank you for attending, madam. It's very kind of you. So, without further ado, I just say once again, thank you very much for attending, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, everyone.